Hey y'all, I'm Dr. Martha Durham here in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm a psychologist, and this is the Why Did They Do That podcast. Today, I'm really excited to talk to Joelle Maldonado. Her brand name is The Grave Woman, and she's going to talk to us about everything death rituals, being a death doula, which is something I would love to learn about. So, welcome, Joelle, and tell me what you do.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Dr. Durham. My
Please
name
call
is
me
Joelle.
Martha.
Okay, thank you for having me, Martha. As you said, my name is Joelle Maldonado, and I'm known all over the world as the Grave Woman. And I'm a licensed funeral director, embalmer, and insurance agent in the states of South Carolina and Georgia. I refer to myself as a sacred grief care practitioner because I have no training in counseling or mental health anything, but I approach grief care from a holistic and spiritual perspective. And most fondly, and the thing that I'm most proud of is that I'm the founder of the Multicultural Death and Grief Care Academy, where we educate about cultural nuance and cultural inclusion and diversity in end of life death and grief care.
That's wonderful. So my understanding of all this comes back to graduate school, where my research was on death, dying, and bereavement.
Mhm.
Um, and so in that process, I learned and continue to see that there are really big differences culturally in how we approach death, what we do after death. So talk to me a little bit about different cultures and what you see.
Absolutely. So I'll start with my own culture, which is the Gullah Geechee culture of Beaufort, South Carolina. And in our culture, when someone is passing away or after they've died, we're more concerned about the spiritual ascension of that person, right?
Right.
There's not saying that the body isn't important after death, but what's more important is what we believe happened to their spirit. And that's rooted a lot in our ancestral African lineage, as well as nuances that relate to Christianity. In other cultures, for example, Jewish cultures or Jewish faiths, what happens to the body is vitally important.
Right.
After that person passes away, within 24 hours, their body must return to the dirt,
Mhm.
if possible, if at all possible. That changed a little bit during COVID, not necessarily from a cultural perspective, but an ability perspective for funeral professionals. But yeah, there's just so many different nuances. The way that we approach pre-planning, the way that we approach conversations about what happens not only to our bodies, but our things, what disposition methods are allowed. And disposition methods, for those that may be unfamiliar, do you want to be embalmed? Do you want
Right.
to be cremated directly? Do you want to be embalmed with fire or with water through alkaline hydrolysis?
Oh, wow.
Or in newer practices, do you want human composting?
Right.
So there's so many different things from a end of life perspective, the way that we express our feelings and fears and emotions around grief and death and transition are different from culture and culture to culture, faith to faith. The
Right.
way that grief is expressed, sometimes a big conversation that we have through the academy is about medical or assisted living
Yeah.
or places where people die in facilities, what is considered appropriate and not appropriate as far as grief expression,
Right.
and teaching professionals to kind of shift their paradigm a little bit and allow for cultural nuance and expressions in different ways. So, I mean, there's so many different things.
Well, and you bring up a really important point. Grief is different for each person, and then culturally, it can be different. And one of the things you don't want to do is have someone have what we used to call disenfranchised grief. And yeah, so when you talk about what's okay, I think providers need to understand that these differences are sacred to people. And, in some cultures, so my mother was from Islamic culture and keening, which is a form of expression of grief of some of the Islamic countries and faith. And also the body is important there too. I believe it's the same 24 hours, and you don't want the body to touch the ground. Like there are so many interesting things. If you go even further back, my mother was from Iran, which is the home of Persia, which was where Zoroastrianism was. And there's a funeral pyre with that where you burn the body, and I think with everyone there. So, we might go, oh my goodness, but that is a long tradition and it's sacred. So it's so important to understand that.
Absolutely. And you said such an important word. It doesn't disenfranchise grief, and it's not always related to culture. In our society, we as humans decide what types of grief are acceptable versus which ones aren't. For example, someone shouldn't grieve an abortion, but you should be able to grieve if your baby dies. So,
Right.
just the way that we think and approach conversations about grief is important because we never know what someone's experience is or what they've endured.
So you bring up abortion, there's also pet, when a pet dies, there's judgment that people have, like you're not allowed to grieve that. And so then you're grieving silently, and then that can lead to mental health issues.
Absolutely. And you brought up something that's controversial when we were talking a little bit before the show, which is medical aid in dying.
Yes.
And part of the work that I do, I'm on the board of directors for an organization called Compassion and Choices, which is the largest national organization. And what we do is we advocate for medical aid in dying, and we've worked to change the laws in about 13 states over the past 20 years. And as a part of that work, as it relates to culture, I'm the chair of the People and Culture Committee for the board and organization. And so, even having conversations culturally about medical aid and dying vary from community to community. And as I said in the beginning, I mean, it is a big cult, like the whole conversation is very controversial. However, at the end of the day, these are people making very big decisions
Right.
about not suffering. And
Right.
so, having conversations with their families that don't necessarily agree with the
Right.
patient's
They
decision,
might
or the
have
medical
spared,
teams
right. They might,
that in those states where it's legal, where the doctors do may not agree with
right.
medical aid in dying, but then have to serve and follow the laws in those states. And so the conversation, there's so many nuances. I keep using that word, but I mean, there's so many.
Well, it's a great word. It is very important. And so to clarify what you're talking about, when I was doing my research many years ago, we called it hastened death. Then it was called assisted suicide. I know that now there are things like the Hemlock Society, and there are states where it's legal to have medical practitioners um, assist in an earlier death if a person is suffering and they choose it. And so I think that's a choice, and it's a valid choice. It might not be your choice or my choice, but it's a valid choice, and we should honor a person's right to do that. I do know legally some folks then have to travel to different states, and I don't know how that's possible if you're in the dying process. So sometimes people may not be able to do that.
Absolutely. There are criteria, and for the sake of not remembering exactly what that criteria is, I'm not going to begin to itemize what it is. But if individuals would like to learn more about medical aid in dying and compassion and choices, feel free to visit our website, compassionandchoices.org.
I love that. You mentioned being training or being a death doula. I think you train death doulas. Tell us what that is.
Absolutely. So a death doula is as old as time, right? Traditionally and historically, women have accompanied the dying in various capacities. When I think of death doulas, I think of my mom. I think of my grandmother and the elder women in my community, and being a little girl and traveling with them to nursing homes and people's homes and sitting vigil with the family and giving people sponge baths or taking them cooked meals, cleaning their houses. Deanna and I, when we were little girls, used to travel with the elder women in our family and go to people's houses and clean up. And we didn't, at that time, at least I didn't realize that these people were dying. And
Right.
what my mother, my grandmother, my aunts, and the elder women in our community were doing were essentially serving as death doulas,
Yes.
sitting with them, helping them do things that they physically could not do, making them comfortable as
Yes.
they transitioned. And so in modern day, what a death doula is someone who does essentially that. They're a non-medical professional or presence with the dying that accompanies and companions with them along their journey. And they guide the family through what active dying looks like. And the role varies based on the circumstances that the person in transition is feeling or experiencing. Someone may be going through the medical aid and dying process. And so the death doula is there to explain and be an advocate for that person, speak up, answer questions, ask questions on behalf of the family, or it could be someone that's terminally ill And just in the process of dying, and the death doula is there to serve as that companion and offer information, guidance, and comfort to the family. And so I don't consider myself to be a death doula, but through the academy, we do train death doulas on things, technical skills like taking care of the hair of people that have textured hair, making people comfortable in their skin. I'll give you the perfect example. I share in class that when a Caucasian person or a non-ethnic person takes a bath or is bathed, that's the end of the process after they're dried. But if my job is to provide comfort, either as a medical professional, an aide, or especially a death doula, when you're working with families of color, there's a next step after that, which
Right.
is moisturizing the body,
Yes.
which is putting those oils that were lost in that bathing process back in. And so little things like that, shampooing, detangling, and, caring for our hair, because our hair is different than
Yes.
your hair. Having conversations, our language, our body language, things that we do that may be offensive or rooted in bias, rooted in racism and prejudice. We talk about all of those things. And I educate death doulas, funeral professionals, medical professionals about those things and just try to help them understand, again, those cultural and ethnic nuances.
I mean, what a gift for people. And what I love is you were raised in this tradition, so you don't fear death. And I think one of the things that happens culturally that I see in America, at least, is people not wanting to deal with death, so they don't do anything, and then people are left after they die to figure out what happens next. And I think
Absolutely.
if you're not afraid of it and you understand it's a natural part of life, it's going to happen to all of us, then you provide a gift to that person and to that family.
Absolutely. And you're so right. There's so many reasons why people don't plan for not only death, but like their funerals or even plan for grief, as strange as that
Mhm.
sounds. And of course, the number one thing, like you just said, is discomfort with conversations about death and dying. It makes us uncomfortable.
Right.
And we feel as if, and like here in Beaufort, they say you're putting mouth on me if you talk about death, right? And
Right.
so discomfort with death. And then a lot of times people have the assumption that the family will just handle it. I'll pass away and my family will just take care of everything.
Oh, it's so
Well,
hard.
what if your family's not financially prepared? What
Correct.
if your family is so distraught by your loss or you die in such a tragic way that
Yeah.
they can't handle it? Or what if your family is just not mentally or emotionally in a place where they can handle it?
Right.
Um, I also think sometimes it's just simple lack of awareness or misinformation. People often don't know what about what we call pre-planning,
Yes.
or there's this misconception or misunderstanding that you have to have a lot of money or that you
Right.
have to pay for your funeral 100% upfront, which is not frowned upon,
Right.
in my opinion. But there are options available like insurance policies or trusts that you can have allocated specifically for funeral and burial needs.
Right.
And so, um, a lot of times people also believe that they're too young or
Yeah.
they're too healthy. And so they procrastinate. And before you know it, either there's an accident, people get sick unexpectedly, or, people just die.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the last thing I'll say is that, again, people have other financial concerns or pressing priorities, but there is a difference between pre-planning and pre-funding. Pre-planning looks like taking the time to come up with details like what's your favorite song? What flowers do you want? Who do you want to speak? Things like that.
Right.
Pre-funding is putting that financial power behind those plans.
Right. And it can be very expensive and it can be a lot less expensive. And I think some people make choices of, I really don't want anything. I want to be cremated and you can scatter my ashes, to, I want to have a big church service. I want these songs played. I want to be buried this way. And so I think probably the continuum of what you would pay is large. And so you shouldn't be afraid of planning just because you think you don't have the money, which I think is what you were saying.
Absolutely.
I want to bring in so the death doula process sounds a whole lot like palliative care in some ways and hospice. I know that it's a little bit different, but as I came up through hospice, that's where my research was done. And there's a whole lot of benefit for some people to die at home, to have professionals coming in and walking their family through it. And you made me think about how that we explain the phases of dying. and educate people and comfort people. You probably are like me. I am comfortable being around dying people. Not everybody is. So I think there are multiple ways that you can help your family, and families can be okay with the process with people like you, organizations like yours, and then also palliative care, hospice care, and things like that.
Can I ask you a question?
Ask away.
Okay, so I know a lot of times when we have conversations about grief, right, especially from an aftercare perspective in the funeral home, we lean towards the Kubler-Ross 5 or 7 steps or stages of grief, right?
DABDA. DABDA is the
Yes.
acronym, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But I in my research, I learned that that is or was specifically developed for anticipatory grief. So if someone's terminal and you have that time to process the loss,
Yeah.
what do those stages look like when when someone unexpectedly passes away or there's no preparation time?
So you're gonna make me geek out. And so I'm gonna be boring for a minute. So modern thought about all that is that humans don't go through strict stage theories. And so the Kubler-Ross theory is a stage theory. And what I mean by that is it sounds like you would go into denial and I'm not going to know what they all are, but it's depression, anger, bargaining, denial, acceptance in some sort of order. The truth is that humans may do some or all of those. Not everybody does. Anticipatory grief is, this is going to sound terrible, but easier sometimes because as a person is dying slowly, and this would be true of dementia, cancers, and stuff like that, the family, the loved ones are grieving along the way. And what sometimes happens then is they'll come into my office and they'll say, I feel guilty that I don't feel as bad as I think I should, or I feel relieved. And that's about you've done the grieving. You don't want to see this person suffer anymore. And so there's a relief that they're released from that. And then if you get to the unexpected traumatic deaths, what will happen is it's sort of the same. We don't know what phases you'll go through. We know that we should accept your grief, your unique grief, and support you in that. What I would say to people is as long as you don't want to harm yourself, as long as you are not self-medicating so you can't function, most grief is okay. And so the society doesn't let us do that, but a therapist will say, you're doing fine. And often I will get people to talk with other people who are grieving because the world will do things like say, it's time to move on. And the world moves on and your heart's shattered and you're not wanting to move on. So I hope that answers your question a little bit. I love Kubler-Ross, and I think that she had a lot of things right. I just want to make sure that people know your unique grief is probably okay, and you need people to support that.
Thank you. You did answer my question.
Good. Being here today, I would love to have you back on.
Okay.
Talk about anything you want to, including death and dying, right? But it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I think this is going to be so important for people to hear what you do and learn about it.
Appreciate that so much. And I can't wait to have you on my podcast too.
Thank you. I'd love to come.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.